This video is going to show you how to calculate with complex numbers. So you need to get out your calculate sticky, and you'll see the soft keyboard comes up where we have all the math templates. And if you go into math, you'll see this I template, and that's the one you want to use when you're working with complex numbers. But before you start doing calculations with complex numbers, you want to make sure that your paper, the entire paper, has been put into complex mode. And so we're going to go for the 3 dots that are assigned to the entire paper, not the one assigned to the sticky, but rather for the whole paper so that it will be able to set. So if you go into the math settings, you'll see that there's complex format, and this will allow you to do calculations and get complex results. So we're going to turn that on, hit OK, and now complex is turned on. So we can do some simple complex calculations. So let's say we have 3 plus 2, and I'm going to use this template here, and we hit execute. It's going to give us our result. We can, add different things or do complex multiplication. Let's go back into math here. So once you have it in complex mode, all your calculations work. You can also find functionality. Let's say you have a complex function or term that you're going to be working with a lot. You can assign it a value, or you can go into the function list. So I want to show you where that exists if you forget the syntax. So we're going to go into function list, and you'll see that we have calculations. Let's make sure I'm doing this correct. There we go. Down here. So you'll see this list of all the different functions. But if we go into complex, you're going to see all the different syntax and functions here. So you can find the argument of a complex number, the conjugate, the real part, the imaginary part. You can expand them. You can change a complex to a polar, or a complex to a trig, or a complex to a rectangular, right? So let's go back to our calculations and just see how that works. So we could just work with some function and type it over and over again. So for example, let's say we want to find the argument, and we could type in 3 plus 2, and we'll get our I in there as well. You want to use this so that you're not using the variable I. So then when I hit execute, it's going to find me the argument for that. But if I know I'm going to be using this particular complex expression over and over, I could actually define it and give it a variable name. So I could say that my complex is B, and I could define it to be this complex number. And now I can just use B in all of my arguments. So it works the same. So now if I did the argument of just B, which is faster to type, I'm going to get the same result because I've defined B to always be this. So now let's just show you how to get through some of the things. So if I wanted the conjugate, I can just start typing, and you'll notice that down here, I get, now let's kind of close our keyboard for a minute, I get the conjugate, and it kind of gives me the syntax right there. So it says I need my expression, and so now I have the conjugate right there. So let's try the real, and maybe the imaginary part of this. So I'm just able to use B that I've defined up here as this complex number over and over again without having to retype it. You could retype it, so if I did the imaginary of my same expression or a different one, I should get the same result, right? So it sort of depends. If you're using the same one over and over, give it a variable name, and then you can just use the variable. Or if you're working with several different complex numbers, you can type them individually. But once you start, whoops, if I want to maybe change this to a polar, notice the minute I start typing, I get my syntax thing that comes up here for me. So now I need to just put in parentheses my term, and there is and we can spread this out so you can see it a little better, my complex form of that my polar form of that complex number. So we could do the same thing here for comp. And so notice, again, once I start typing, it brings up all my choices. So let's say instead of to polar, I want to do trig, and I can now just put in my B, and now it's going to give me the trig form of that same complex number. So the functionality is there. If you start typing, you think you know what you want, it's going to pop up the syntax, but if you can't find it exactly, you can always go into the function list and see all of the different syntax here in a list under complex. So that's how you work with complex numbers. Just the main thing to remember is once you start and you're thinking about working with complex, just make sure the math settings of the entire paper are set to complex so that your answers are going to be complex.